plane bound way. I see her stretching out below. Land, blessed motherland, the place where I was born. Scars, yeah, she's got her scars. Sometimes it starts to worry me. 'Cause Luke, I don't want to side of who's on. From the mountain to the wave crash coast. There's a way.
See that? In a while I had to see. I was Seastone. What's she up to?
Here in town.
It's been a long, hard ride. Got a ways to go, but this is still the place that we all call home. Don't get along, 'cause saying no, we're not the same, that's what makes us strong. From the mountains high to the wave crash coast, there's a way to find. There's things I know. It's been a long, hard ride. Got a ways to go, but this is still the place that we all call home. Gotta call it brave to chase that dream across the sea. Then they sign their name for something they believe. How the blood ran red, we laid our dead in sacred ground. Just think, wonder what they think if they could see us now. It's been a long, hard ride, got a ways to go, but this is still the place that we all call home. It's been a long, hard ride, and I won't lose hope. This is still the place that we all call home.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets repeat, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that
I long to be in the places that I see, in the pictures of my dreams, where there's mountains full of trees, meadows carpeted in green, silent snowfall, clear running streams, where the bare grass blooms in the springtime of the year, and the larch turn gold in the fall, where there's deer, elk, and antelope, beaver, bear, and bird, and the yipping coyotes serenade them all. Yes, there's no place like Montana, the big sky country, my home, place set my spirit free, a Rocky Mountain melody, these things are a part of me. Montana, Montana, my home. Charlie Russell clouds paint sunsets in the west, in colors of red, blue, and gold. Snow-capped peaks reach endless to the sky, and the grain fields with the gentle breezes blow. There's high mountain lakes, the Missoula River breaks, and the open plains where the buffalo used to roam. It's a cowboy song, it's where Indians belong. God's country, my home, sweet home. Yes, there's no place like Montana, the big sky country, my home, a place to set my spirit free, Rocky Mountain melody, these things are a part of me. Montana, Montana, my home. I had a dream of how heaven's supposed to be. When I die, that's where I wanna go. 'Cause there's mountains full of trees, meadows carpeted in green, silent snowfall, clear running streams. Yes, there's no place like Montana, big sky country, my home, place to set my spirit free, Rocky Mountain melody, these things are a part of me. Montana, Montana, my home, Montana.
Yeah, go ahead and have a seat, if you have a seat. You can have them, smoke them. I'd like to introduce Father Robert Noonan to give our invocation.
O God, Holy One, the evidence of your self-communication and love is all around us everywhere. In the inner depths of my own heart, in the world, in all creatures around me, you live and move and have your being. I'm not separate from you, and because of your wondrous love, I'm not separate from all creation. Help me to live with eyes wide open to your self-communication. Help me to be open to your lavish grace, to receive it without fear, with the conviction that you want nothing more than me to receive it. In turn, may I be gracious to others, an instrument in your lavish grace to all on me, as have our veterans that we honor today.
I want to welcome you to this, the 32nd annual Post 101 Veterans Day ceremony. I also want to thank you and point out, and I think we give a hand to Susanna Craigwick, who sang the national anthem, will be singing again. Also, LeGrand Harvey, Rod Brode, and Louis Bond for the Montana song, Montana Melody. There are a lot of other people, of course, to thank, and I don't want to get into calling people names, but so I won't say them individually. But everyone who's here today, as well as everyone who's helped out on this. Veterans Day, November 11th, 11 o'clock on 11th day, 11th month, 1918. The guns of August, fell silent on the Western Front as the armistice went into effect in World War I. And every year since then, we've celebrated at this time. In the mid-1950s, after the Korean War, this became Veterans Day rather than Armistice Day. And each year we celebrate. This is the day we honor veterans, not simply those who died, but all who served. Each year we choose a theme for our ceremony, and the theme of this year's ceremony is "For Those with Wounds That Show No Scars." It's a statement about the fact that a lot of people come back from war psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually wounded. And so we're going to focus on that today. It's somewhat of a heavy topic. We're also going to be paying tribute to our soldiers, our veterans today, but we're going to be talking about the problems that they face as well. So at this time, I want to turn the microphone over to Sam Redfern, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Good morning. Good morning. Y'all ready to run in place?
Yeah.
Thanks for being here today. Want to give a warm welcome to all our veterans. Every one of you are loved and appreciated. I served in Iraq myself, and I like the weather here better. I introduce our next speaker. Is going to be Missoula County Commissioner Gene Curtis, to welcome us all to Missoula, and thank you for being here, ma'am.
Good morning. On behalf of Missoula County, I welcome you to the annual Veterans Day ceremony on the courthouse lawn, and thanks to Dan and all the others who organize it every year. We have a couple of memorials here. One is the Doughboy behind me. And the other is that tree behind you, the blue spruce tree, which was planted October 11th, 2001, in honor of those who died on 9/11. The theme today is for those with wounds that show no scars. Veterans returning from all wars have these hidden wounds, wounds to their heart, to their mind, and their soul. War does that to people. Let's not forget their family members who have hidden wounds too. We send one person off to war and a different person returns. Life at home for the veterans and their families is always different. But let's also remember some of our community members that have self-medicated those wounds with alcohol and drugs. And when you see them, I hope that you will not judge them, but rather think of their sacrifice and what our community can do to help. It's shameful that many of the folks in our community that are hungry or homeless served our country. So we need to do more to take care of that. Missoula is developing a Joining Community Forces project to connect veterans and their families with the resources that they need. So watch for ways that you and your business can get involved in that. We also have a veterans court where we help veterans who have got into the court system for some reason, and we're always looking for mentors, veterans who can help them to walk through those areas. And then there are things like Valor House, and I know that Councilman Wilkins is always gathering socks this time of year to give to veterans who live in the Valor House. So again, let's not forget all those scars that we can't see, and thanks for coming today.
Well, it's a heck of a lot warmer today than a few of the Veterans Days that I've been up here to speak to you a little bit, so it's nice to have nice weather. Anyway, I'm going to read a letter that's sent to us from Senator Tester on behalf of Veterans Day. So, to all service members and veterans, thank you for your service to our country and for protecting the freedoms that all Americans enjoy. It is important to remember the sacrifices of our military members and their families make, and the promises we make to them once they return home. The transition from military to civilian life can be difficult, and that's why we have a responsibility to make that transition as seamless as possible. That means making sure that veterans have access to quality, affordable health care, access to a good education and to a good job, and access to safe, affordable housing. As your senator, I will work every day to make sure this nation keeps its promises to our veterans and honors their sacrifice. Thank you again, Senator John Tester.
At this time, I would like to introduce the mayor of the city of Missoula, who's going to make some remarks on behalf of the city. And if he would come up here and do his routine for us now. Okay, John Engen.
Thank you, Dan. Gosh, it's reached a point where this is a routine now, Dan. Appreciate that very much. It is pretty remarkable. So the thing you need to know about Dan is he's prepared for anything except for cold. So I was shocked to see these shelters here on a day when we really don't need them. We've had minus 30 before, however, and not so much. I also note, for the record, United States Senator under shelter, priest slightly outside of shelter, veteran further outside of shelter, mayor and county commissioner way outside of the shelter, and I'm not sure what that means either. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think of the almost decade now, I think, that I've had the privilege of joining you all and spending a little time on Veterans Day, reflecting on what it means to our community. At my office at home, above my desk, there's a collage of photos of Company I, the 164th Infantry, United States Army. That was my dad's outfit, and I was looking at those pictures today, 100 or so guys at that time, and what struck me then and what I continue to think about today as we think about hidden wounds is the fact that every one of those pictures, with the exception of a few officers, every one of those pictures was of a boy, really, a kid. A very young man sent to a very strange place to do very complex, challenging, and emotionally wrenching things on behalf of their nation, and they were kids. I look at my friend Ron Scharf over here, who was all of a teenager when he engaged in battle in World War II, and I think of my dad on Veterans Day, and I think of what it must have been like to be a 17-year-old kid, go through training and suddenly find yourself at Guadalcanal and then hopping islands for 3 years away from your family on a farm in North Dakota. And it's remarkable that he came back and he was able to make a life. And all of you who have been able to come back and make a life, whether you're a veteran of World War II or a veteran of yesterday. It's remarkable. We need to do more to help ensure that you all can make a life in our community. We owe you much, and we owe you at least that. So when my dad came back, got married, got a job, raised a family, and talked very little, frankly, about the war, and only sort of later in his life, and frankly, after he died, have I learned more about his experience there. Pretty remarkable. The most remarkable thing to me is that he came back still with a sense of humor. So in honor of my dad, Roy William Engen, who would be 93 today, I think about what he always told me before a meal. And I know that Dan's going to invite you over to the old post to have SOS, chipped beef on toast, to enjoy later. And as Roy always said to me, I never like to eat on an empty stomach. It's a pleasure to see you all today. Thank you all for your service. Thank you, families, friends, loved ones, for continuing to support these men and women who have given their all in some cases and most of what they have in other cases so that we can enjoy a place like Missoula, Montana and be a community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Engen. You know, about the shelters, I have to convince Dan every year not to do foxholes and ponchos. So you all could be under ponchos if he had his way, but some of you know what that's like. But yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Gallagher, commander of American Legion Post 101. For years, Keith has been a part of this. I guess it's a routine for the mayor now, and glad to have you here, Senator. I've been involved for the last few years, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. And one of the things about Dan Gallagher that I didn't realize until I got kind of tasked out this year is how much work he puts into this and how much he really cares about his fellow vets. And it is a tough topic. I mean, if any one of us have served in combat are honest, when we came home, we went through that whole gamut of emotion and transition, and there is darkness, but there's also light. And we really appreciate Dan Gallagher, and I just want to introduce him. He's also a man, not many of you know this, but he's been named by the Jeanette Rankin Center as Peacemaker of the Year. And he's a man who also believes, who's been to combat in Vietnam, but also believes in peace. And I love him. He's been a mentor to me as a young vet, and it's my pleasure to introduce him.
I assume that Sam meant as one young vet to another. I want to, this year we chose a theme of, for those with wounds that show no scars. That's our theme today, and that's our focus. And by the way, what I say in my remarks may sound gloomy, but this is part of a story that has to be told, I think. You know, when the guns of war begin to fire, we send to war our young men and women, send them to the fight, sometimes with fanfare, other times near oblivion in their departure. But always we accept, at least intellectually, that some of them will come back in body bags, that others will return missing limbs, some will return minimally injured, and very many will escape with bodies totally unravaged by shot or shell. But many, and I believe most, perhaps even all, who see combat will return bearing the wounds that show no scars. It's extremely easy to recognize those severely wounded physically by combat. It's almost impossible not to notice the effects on the more minimally wounded. And obviously, it is totally impossible not to be aware of those who made the supreme sacrifice in war, what with the ritual and the grief. But recognizing the existence of the wounds that show no scars is vastly more difficult. No wooden crutches support the soldier's struggle with those wounds, and no patches or bandages cover those wounds. There are no tender, sympathetic smiles to greet those who bring a psychological, emotional, or even spiritual burden back from war. There's no outstretched arms reaching to steady the steps of those with war's invisible wounds. And the reason is in the problem itself. A wounded spirit shows no physical scars, although the pain and the devastation is every bit as real. Unlike physical wounds, the wounds that show no scars don't present themselves instantly. They develop at their own sinister and debilitating pace. Rather than bleeding vessels and twisted bones and a halting, limping walk, the unseen wounds of battle are manifested in erratic behavior, withdrawal from society, frustrated relationships, exaggerated fears and reactions, conduct that's unacceptable or damaging to others, and eventually in actions that are self-abusive and self-destructive for the veteran, him or herself. Every returning soldier's experience with such wounds is unique, but those experiences seem to follow a similar and all too familiar pattern. The effects of those wounds usually appear slowly at first, unpleasant but not necessarily overwhelming. An occasional bad dream, jumping at the sound of a car backfiring, and finding that vivid memories are brought to the surface with sounds and smells. And then time passes, but the memories continue to be relived. The reactions become stronger and more lasting effects, and the dreams become more graphic, more convoluted, and more terrifying. And soon the memories and the reactions and the dreams become themselves the source of stress. Self-doubt and fear set in. The memories of war and the bad dreams attaching themselves to the veteran's days and nights, and the veterans can't really understand why. He wonders why on far too many nights he awakens, sitting bolt upright in his bed, staring into the darkness, wondering where he's at, his face and neck dripping with sweat, his heart racing, out of breath, shouting surreal commands or mumbling unintelligibly, feeling a fright greater than what he ever felt in war. He finds himself lying in bed in a safe home under a beautiful big sky and wonders how he could have been awakened by the sounds of guns that, for him, fell silent months or years or even decades ago. He can still hear those guns. His wife and his children and his family and his friends, they're wondering the same thing. The problems keep getting worse with the wounds that show no scars, and before long, the veteran's having trouble with just about everything. As the confusion and despair deepens, he may quit an otherwise good job, move out of his house away from spouse and children that he loves, begin self-medicating with booze and drugs, fall into a trap of self-destructive behavior that spirals him further downward. He may become homeless, joining his fellow ex-soldiers in a sad statistic showing that from 1/4 to 2/3 of the homeless Americans are veterans. Still, he wonders what's happening to him and why. His life may be in free fall. He struggles with a veterans assistance bureaucracy whose insensitivity and denial drive him further down until there seems nothing left of his ego or his dignity. And then, for far too many of the veterans who bear the wounds that show no scars, he turns to the only control, the only solution that he can see for himself, his own ultimate resolution. He ends it all. You want some statistics showing the severity of the problem? Okay. More than 58,000 young Americans died in combat in Vietnam, but according to data from reputable sources such as the National Association of Suicidology, more than 70,000 Vietnam veterans died by their own hand since that war ended. That means that more Vietnam veterans ended their own lives than the number of their buddies whose lives were ended by enemy guns. And here's an even more frightening set of statistics and projections. Our newest generation of veterans, those of Iraq and Afghanistan, are committing suicide at a rate that's on a par with the Vietnam veteran statistics. Now listen to this. In a 12-month period last year, more than 350 in-service military personnel, many of them Iraq, Afghan vets, committed suicide. That's one per day. And that number doesn't include suicide by those who are veterans but are no longer counted within Pentagon statistics. And just who are the people that we find in this condition who find their status after war so intolerable that they want to be free of their misery at any cost? Well, they're not merely a bundle of binary data in some government computer, not just a tragic statistic. They're our family, our spouses, our sons and daughters, our parents, our neighbors, and our friends. The young man who still hears the guns of war so loudly that they awaken him in a panic is his wife's husband and his kid's dad. And that leads us to ask, what's being done to help these soldier veterans? Well, more than before, there are things being done, but still not enough. You know, it's said that generals are always fighting the last war. And I maintain that we likewise are always treating for the last war's problems. With Vietnam veterans suffering what was then called delayed stress, years passed before that problem was even accepted by our government as a legitimate ailment. Finally, after many years of struggle, counseling for Vietnam vets was authorized. But what worked for Vietnam veterans cannot necessarily be directly applied to Iraq and Afghan vets, because their problems and the source of their problems is different from what came before. With the Vietnam veterans, the primary stressor was the damning reception in their homeland, but I believe that the primary problem for our latest group of veterans can be traced to the multiple deployments and redeployments that destroy these veterans' ability to trust, to maintain a sense of security, and it strains the capacity of their families to believe that they will ever have stability. They deal with a government agency not known for its speed or sensitivity, and soon these younger vets watch as the yellow ribbons that sent them to war become little more than bureaucratic red tape for them as veterans. So the bad dreams get worse, as does the self-destructive behavior, and the end results can be tragic or even fatal. And then, topping it off, even if they manage to negotiate the bureaucratic maze and actually receive a rating, they, with their brother veterans of all eras and, frankly, all Americans, they watch in dismay as, under the guise of fiscal responsibility, a handful of zealous, overaged juvenile delinquents, legislators in Washington, D.C., treat our country to a governmental shutdown that once again puts the veteran in jeopardy, adding still another layer of stress. And the stress that's being caused brings the sound of guns once more to the veteran's dreams, leaving him or her to wonder and worry anew. So is there anything that can be done? Well, yes, there's much that might or could be done. Some now could be done, some new, some unknown, some yet to be discovered. America's always been able to rise to the needed heights when it puts its collective mind, heart, and resources in motion. It can happen again in our care for the veterans who shoulder the burden of war's unseen wounds. And we all, veteran, citizen, senator alike, will see that it's done. And that's our message today. That's why our focus today is on our nation's defenders who still bear the wounds that show no scars. In his second inaugural, Abraham Lincoln said that it was our nation's sacred duty to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and orphan. Lincoln was, of course, speaking of the war dead and those with bodies ravaged by grape shot and minie balls. But by extension, he was also talking about those who brought the war forever back home in their spirits. And I believe that the great emancipator was, in a larger sense, talking about all Americans who, having answered the call to service, find their veteran years and their sleep diminished by the sound of guns and explosions, whether that be the blast of Civil War cannons, the crash of mortars in Southeast Asia, or the sound of exploding IEDs in the sands of the Middle East. Our history demands that we do something to remedy this situation. The ones suffering most from the invisible scars of war are not only our sons and brothers and buddies and friends, they're our nation's defenders, and our heritage tells us that we really have no alternative. So we rededicate ourselves today, on this Veterans Day 2013, to address and to remedy the problems that our veterans might be enduring for having served on our behalf. And that especially applies to the problems that come to those veterans who bear the wounds that show no scars. Thank you.
I hear the pitch roar of thunder, here comes that cloud again. He visits me so often now, it's my unwanted friend. The winds of change won't blow my way, I can't get no relief. God, I'd give anything for peace. 'Cause I'm walking through those fiery fields like it was yesterday. The battle's raged, the blood is spilled, and I can't get away. Every night's another fight I can't overcome. The world may be in silent sleep, but I still hear the beats. I've got scars that you can't see, and wounds that won't be patched. So many died, Lord, how did I walk away without a scratch? Of these images that haunt my mind, I don't know what gets me most. The guilt of being alive, or the ghost. 'Cause I'm walking through those fiery fields like it was yesterday. The battle's raged, the blood is spilled, and I can't get away. Every night's another fight that I can't overcome. The world may be in silent sleep, but I still hear the gun. Silent sleep. Yeah, the world may be fast asleep, but I still hear the drum.
Dear friends, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. On this day each year, we gather across Montana and all around America to show our respect and gratitude for those who have served our country. Veterans Day is a special day in our nation. It is a day in which we thank those who have and continue to serve. For decades, our enemies have tested our strengths, yet we continue to demonstrate our resolve. America and the world are better places because of the courage of veterans and service members have shown. They answered the call to service, and because of them, the world knows America will fight against the evils of oppression and for the advancement of freedom from sea to shining sea. Today, as we enjoy time with our families, let us not forget those who remain in harm's way. I invite you to remember and honor the courage and sacrifice of these brave men and women. Along with their families, they have given much for the country and the state, which we all love. We recognize their bravery, their honor, and their commitment. If you are a veteran or current member of the armed forces, thank you for your service. If I can ever be of service, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. God bless. Steve Daines, United States Congress.
You know, when we first started doing this ceremony 32 years ago, or back in 1982, dating myself here, but it was the year that the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. was dedicated. And it was that year, the week in November around Veterans Day was called the National Salute to Vietnam Veterans Week. And I was the salute representative, and so I had this ceremony, and we had it up on the steps of the courthouse. And I invited our two senators, at the time John Melcher, and our youngest senator, Max Baucus, as well as State Senator Mike Halligan was there, and County Commissioner Bob Palmer. I don't think there was anybody else. I think it was just us. We were talking to each other for the most part, because it wasn't, in those days we didn't have outdoor ceremonies. That was the first outdoor ceremony, but we had a small audience. Anyway, each year I've wanted to get Max back, and he's always busy with things. He has a job in Washington, D.C., as I understand, that keeps him busy. But that first year that he was here, now 32 years later, he's back. I'm still doing this. Max is retiring, which probably shows he's the smartest one on this dais. But, you know, we're still doing the same thing. Few differences. You know, back then I had hair and his was a different color. But I'm really pleased and proud and grateful to introduce to you Montana's senior U.S. Senator, a man who has been a friend of veterans, who has voted with veterans, who has helped veterans. He has been, along with Senator Tester, continues to be some of the best friends that veterans have in the United States Senate. And when I referred to the legislators who shut down the government, I obviously, let me make that clear, Max, you were not included in that reference. But anyway, I want at this time introduce our senior senator, Max Baucus.
Thank you very, very much, Dan. As we were sitting along this ceremony, I got to think back a few years ago how well I knew you. It was 40 years ago when I started to run for state legislature, and all of you know Dan today, know Dan has always been as committed as always, and back then I have a very, very strong recollection of Dan Gallagher, one of the 2 or 3 people who even then was working so hard for people, for vets, and with the same sincerity and intensity as he has today. You can tell from that wonderful speech he gave about the wounded veterans what a great guy he is. Let's give a big round of applause for Dan Gallagher. Sam, I don't know if you were born then. But if you had been born then and working with Dan, I know you'd be right there with him. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you, sir. And let's big round of applause for the Salish Kootenai Veteran Warrior Society Honor Guard. Let's thank them for being here today. You know, we're all so proud to be Montanans, and it comes through in so many ways. People have heard me say this, and hope there aren't any Texans in the audience, but it's something I think sort of summarizes who we are as Montanans. We Montanans are prouder of Montana than Texans are of Texas. We're just not so loud about it. And we have such a proud tradition. We're so patriotic. More Montanans per person have volunteered for service than any other state in the nation since 9/11, in World War I, World War II. In fact, we even have a couple of counties in Montana have the highest sign-up rate per person than any other county in the nation. We Montanans serve, we're patriotic because we care. Let's give a big round of applause to all veterans who have served the United States of America. I also want to recognize the most special person in my life, and that's my wife, Melody. Melody is standing right over here, waving with the glove, black gloves, the black coats. My wife, Melody. And we're also home to someone else really special. I think he's going to be coming here a little later during this ceremony. We are home to our Missoula hero, David Thatcher, the youngest survivor of World War II's famous Doolittle Raiders. Just think of it. Is David here? David Thatcher. Thank you, David, for all that you've done. David's a real trooper. He just got here from Ohio for a big ceremony over in Ohio. He came all the way here just to be here today. Let's thank David again for being here. As you know, it was a special raid. It was really something. I was thinking of you, David, and others, when I think it was Dan was saying, when you serve, you don't know what you're going to be doing when you serve and sign up. And back in that aircraft carrier, you weren't so sure what's going to be going on in that aircraft carrier, what you're going to be doing, where you're flying to. But there you were, you got in that B-25, and off you went, and it really helped turn the course of the war, although it was very early in the war, because you got the Japanese to know that, hey, they're not safe in their own soil. The United States is going to tough and they're going to beat them. But anyways, David, thank you so much for all that you did. Thank you so much. And it's right here at home in Montana where the first ever special service force learned the skills they have used to take down Nazis in the European theater. And I know a lot of you know about the Devil's Brigade over at Fort Harrison, but we here in Montana with the Devil's Brigade over at Fort Harrison developed that outfit. They went over to Italy. They defeated the Nazis at the top of the hill, and that was the beginning of the special forces, of SEAL Team 6 and Rangers and all the special operations in the United States military. It began right here in Montana, Fort Harrison. Let's thank them. Then what about our Big Sky honor flights? I don't know if any other state has as many Big Sky honor flights as we, to recognize and pay honor and tribute to our World War II veterans. But taking them back to Washington, D.C., nice great ceremony there at the World War II Memorial. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. We've spent a lot of our veterans back to see that World War II Memorial. It's been really something. It means so much to me seeing our vets there at that memorial. Mel and I go out of our way. The dinner preceding the visit to the memorial or at the memorial, and when taps is played, a tingle goes down our spines. It's just seeing our men and women over there for probably the only time to be able to visit Washington, D.C. It's just a special, special moment. In fact, Mel and I talk about it a lot. Mel's father served in the Pacific Theater. My dad served in the European, and they, as often as the case, didn't tell a lot of war stories because it was their job to serve, and they saw such atrocity they didn't want to talk about it very much, and they had to draw it out later. But they're just such special people, those who have served not just in Vietnam, but in Afghanistan, Iraq, but in World War I, II, and Korea. They're just really, really wonderful, wonderful people. And I like to think, frankly, that some of us maybe were raised a little bit better because our parents served. Our parents knew the values of hard work, of patriotism, of working together, and the values that mean so much to us as a society, a civilization. They kind of helped raise us because they learned those values serving in the military or fighting overseas. Sadly, as we know, we've not given enough respect to our veterans, at least not the respect they deserve. When I began representing our state about 40 years ago, we were just winding down involvement in Vietnam. And at that time, remember, we were struggling with our identity. Who are we as a country? The way we so mistreated veterans coming home, it was more than disgusting. It put us all in a very, very unsettling mood, and it's a very, very difficult struggle we were facing. And whether the political decisions that time were right or wrong, we did not give the respect to the soldiers that they deserve. We all know that. We talk about it. It's still something. It's a wound on our soul as a country that we did not pay the respect to them that we should have. And it's motivated us. That realization that we did not give enough respect to our Vietnam vets, I think it's motivated us to make sure that we're not going to do that again. We're never going to ever be able to totally repay the disrespect we gave to our Vietnam vets, but it's still, it's important for us to work to do all the very best that we can. And this is also has been extremely important as we welcome home thousands of men and women from Iraq and Afghanistan. Thanks to a new GI Bill, more than 2,000 Montana veterans and their families were able to go to college in 2012. That's the new GI Bill for Montana vets. In the past 10 years, Congress has doubled the amount of funding for the VA, doubled. And that's an investment that we're sure proud of. We should also be proud of the ways we've stepped up to support our service members and their families, no matter what tragedy befalls them. I'm so happy that today's theme is veterans returning home who were wounded without visible scars. It's so important. Every one of us, either directly, a family member, or a good friend, knows that service men or women who has come home has been affected by the tragedy and the killing, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, or what it is, PTSD. It's so pervasive. Hits us in so many ways. Even hits good friends of ours when they come back. And as was stated before, it's true. When someone goes overseas, the person who comes back is a different person. It's a different person. It's not the same one that went over, because of experiences, many of them tragic, that service men or women have experienced. It happened to one of my very best friends. His name is Dwayne. He is my college roommate. Religious fellow, Baptist, Bible on his desk. One of my very best friends. I had two very good friends at college, and he was one of them, Dwayne. We graduated. Dwayne signed up in the Army, became a forward artillery observer over in Vietnam. He wrote me letters just to say how awful it was, calling in all that death and destruction. He'd call in the coordinates. So the mortar shells would go over and just blow people up, kill people, kill Vietnamese, kill civilians. He saw this over and over again. It bothered him so much. He wrote me a letter and said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going over the hill. I'm leaving. I write back to Dwayne and say, Dwayne, you only have 6 more months. Hang in there. You could do it. It's as bad as it is, as tragic as it is. Well, he stayed in. When I saw Dwayne 6, 8, 10 months later, it was not the same Dwayne. He was nervous. He was almost scary. I did not like being around my very best friend. He was so scary. It was not the same Dwayne. Right over here in my office, I received a telephone call from Dwayne's father. Max, this is Dwayne's dad. What's up? Well, Dwayne's in a little bit of trouble. What is it? Well, it turned out Dwayne was a counselor at a camp over in Oregon. Oh, well, details. He's on drugs and counseling. And he just got something flipped, pulled out a big butcher knife, and killed one of his co-counselors and stabbed another person too. And went to prison, obviously. He's out now. He's in Southern California. But it was the kind of PTSD. It was the trauma of that war that caused that tremendous psychological personality change in Dwayne. It's just awful. In prison, he met a lady, a psychiatrist. They got married. That didn't work out. They're divorced. It's just Vietnam and the tragedy, this trauma of war, just so upset. And so it's changed my good friend Dwayne. Well, we're doing something about the Dwayne samples of the world. And one person is here today I'm just very, very proud of, and that's Matt Coons of Helena. Matt served as an infantry officer in the Army and was recognized as distinguished member of the 35th Regiment. Matt's stepbrother also served as a member of the Montana National Guard in Iraq. They served together like brothers. They were very close. And like too many of our soldiers, Matt's stepbrother suffered from the unseen wounds of war when the pain of coping with PTSD became too much to bear, Matt's stepbrother tragically took his own life. Matt's family devastated, but instead of giving up, Matt did something heroic. What did he do? He fought to make sure that no other family had to go through that same suffering. Worked closely with the Montana National Guard to develop a groundbreaking model for PTSD screening. I was very proud to work with Matt as a few years ago in the Montana Guard, take our model nationwide and put it in the 2010 Defense Authorization Bill. Let me just underline that point. This is a screening process that we developed first here in our own state, in Montana, the Army Guard and the Air Guard. I remember over in Great Falls talking to the troops over there and how we began to put our program together. I mean, a really comprehensive screening program, not just check the box. This is very comprehensive to screen up PTSD. It worked so well that I worked to get it in the Defense Authorization Bill, so now it is standard procedure in our U.S. military that began right here in Montana. We'd be very proud if we put that together. And because of Matt Coons and the Montana Guard, every branch of the military has implemented these screenings. And more importantly, about 800,000 service members have received personal, private, one-on-one attention from a trained healthcare provider both before and after they deploy. Make no mistake, these screenings are helping to save lives. Let's give a big round of applause to Matt. Matt Coons, right over here. He has done so much to help our young men and women. I can't thank him enough. In fact, Tom Turrentino with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans America has this to say. He said he believes these screenings will save more lives than F-35 fighter jets or more than MRAPs. Screenings are going to make the difference. And just last week, the Service Women's Action Network released new data showing that the VA is approving PTSD claims for cases related to sexual trauma at a much lower rate than those not related to sexual assault. This is all so weaves together the trauma of war and the psychological trauma of war. It's just unacceptable, any of the adverse consequences. It's unacceptable that after fighting for our country, sexual assault survivors shouldn't have to fight for the resources that they need. Last week, John Chester and I introduced a bill to reform military court proceedings so that folks who come forward and report sexual assault are not harassed and intimidated while seeking justice. That's another step we have to be taking, and we are taking it. We must double down on our efforts to protect survivors and prevent violence from happening in the first place. Our military heroes bring incredible skills to the workforce, yet face unemployment rates nearly double the general population. I started off this Congress by declaring war on veterans' unemployment, and will keep fighting to improve tax credits, to help businesses hire vets, and help veterans transition into the civilian job market. If a soldier can drive a Humvee in Afghanistan, he sure as heck can drive a truck in Montana without jumping through the hoops to get a license. That's another change we're making. You don't have to go through all that again. We have a lot to be proud of. We also have a long way to go. In war, there are no unwounded soldiers. We will continue working together to make sure every vet comes home to a country worthy of his or her sacrifice. Thanks for having me here today. Thank you so much to all our veterans who currently serve and to their families. May God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Senator Baucus. I should also add, Gene talked about our veterans and the problems, and Mayor Engen talked about his dad, and Lieutenant Governor Walsh is here, who's an Iraq veteran, and of course all of us in Post 101 who served. Senator Baucus lost a nephew in the Iraq-Afghanistan war, so I think everybody here on this dais understands totally the cost of war, and understands also how personal it is, which leads to this next part of what we're about to do, which is to the placement of flowers on this honor table for people to remember, a chance for people to remember their those who are important in their lives, the veterans important in their lives. We remember as individuals, as neighbors, as family, and this is the portion where you, all the people in attendance, get to actually be part of this commemoration, a part where each of you, veteran or not, are invited to place a flower on this honor table in remembrance of a veteran that was significant in your life. Post 101 has bought red, white, and blue carnations for you to bring to the honor table as a way to both make a symbolic statement of respect and recognition, or simple acknowledgement of the veteran's life, the veteran in your family. We begin this portion of the ceremony, though, with a placement of 3 flowers in recognition of all veterans' service, of all veterans as individuals. And Dana and Kylie and Aspen, I believe, are out there with flowers, and if Everett and Betsy and Sam are all there, I want to introduce the people who will be bringing up these first 3 flowers. We're going to have background music behind it, but after the initial placement of flowers by the 3, at a certain point, Dana and Kylie, they will tell you when to move forward, but basically people line up and get a flower. We provide them from Dana, and like I said, she will tell you, when to go forward. The people who are going to be presenting this initial placement are World War II veteran and Moise farmer Everett Faust, who incidentally, Max is talking about the honor flight. Everett was in Washington, D.C., I believe back in May, I guess it was, on the honor flight to D.C. He talked about it, said it was an incredible event, incredible time, incredible experience for him. Second person is Jeanette Rankin Peace Center Executive Director Betsy Mulligan-Daig. And the third person presenting is our own Sam Redfern, who's an Iraq veteran. This is a time to recognize the veterans in your life. And veterans have served. Theodore Roosevelt, a long time ago, back in 1910, was talking about citizenship, the duties of citizenship in a republic. And he was talking about how important it was to serve, to have service. And he said, the quote that many of you have heard many times, said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." I think it's safe to say that the veterans, those people who served, can never, ever be thought of as cold and timid souls. So at this point, we are going to begin our presentation, but I want a couple instructions first. The 3 people will bring the flowers up for the initial placement in remembrance of all veterans, and then with instructions, the rest of you line up and take a flower and come forward. First of all, when you come forward, I'd suggest that you allow a little distance between yourself and the person in front, so they have that moment of reflection with the veteran they're remembering. Not always, we're not having a lengthy name reading, but just allow enough time. Secondly, if you want to mention aloud the name of the veteran you're remembering, feel free to do so as you place the flower. If you want to make a gesture in remembrance, a salute, sign of the cross, a similar gesture, feel free to do that as well. And I guess with that, we got a space in there, we got enough room for people to come up. But with that, I guess I just say that we begin the flower placement portion of our ceremony. This is ours. This is your chance for veteran remembrance. Okay?
have that did not come home from Vietnam.
you need to... Let me know.
No, actually, actually, he asked me to do it. He asked me to do it.
Is there anybody else who? Is there anyone else who wants to put a flower in remembrance? Okay. Keith?
Thank you all for being here today. I wish I could have joined you to thank the men and women who have worn the uniform of our great nation. Montana has the highest rate of military service in the nation. A full 10% of our state's population has served, is currently serving in the military, or is a member of their family. Service to our community, state, and country is something that is at our core as Montanans. We should use today to recommit ourselves to fulfilling the promise we made to our servicemen and women. A promise that when they return home, they will return to a job, educational opportunities, and access to health care. Health care that includes not just treatment for their physical wounds, but also the wounds we can't see. As these heroes return from Iraq and Afghanistan, many of them are returning with mental health issues. It is our duty to ensure they have the opportunity to access care for this just like any other injury. I want to thank you all for being here today, but most importantly, I'd like to thank all the members of our armed forces and their families for their service and sacrifices they've made so that we can continue to enjoy the freedoms that we hold dear. Sincerely, Steve Bullock, Governor, State of Montana.
We're going to kind of change our agenda a little bit. And by the way, I want to, before I forget, I want to thank not only the Veteran Warrior Society Color Guard, but also we have some people here dressed in period uniforms as soldiers. They include a couple from Loyola High School, a couple of friends, and Monica's a veteran, an Iraq veteran. Anyway, I want to thank them. They're standing there representing the people from all wars, and maybe we should do a little hand for these people for coming out and doing this for us. And of course, thanks to Hayes Autopoly, who's provided a lot of this stuff for us. I think Hayes has more military equipment than the U.S. Army does. So, but at this point, I want to turn the microphone over to Max and to Senator Baucus so he can make a presentation. So Max, if you feel free to.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to, on behalf of all of us, again honor David Thatcher, Staff Sergeant David Thatcher, who was one of Doolittle's raiders, 60, 70 American soldiers got on a plane and helped turn the course of the war against Japan. I have with me a congressional record statement that I put in the press record in April of this year. I'm going to give it to David right now, and let's just, as I'm walking over there, let's just really, really give a good Big Sky, Montana round of applause for David Thatcher.
Our next speaker, I want to say, Sam's going to introduce him, but you know, I called to arrange this ceremony. I called the Lieutenant Governor, and his office told me he was speaking in Butte in the morning on Veterans Day, but they said that they thought that they could get a plane, and after the 10 o'clock Butte event, they could make it to Missoula. That sort of thing can only happen in Butte or with Butte people. He hijacked a plane, he landed it here, and he's now at our ceremony. But I want to let Sam Redfern introduce Lieutenant Governor.
Well, Lieutenant Governor Walsh is an Iraq combat veteran. And we are very happy to have you here, sir. I won't go, just for time's sake, too much into it, but you know, he commanded our Montana Guard forces in Iraq during a very difficult and complex war, and now he's our lieutenant governor. And you know, I've been with him at a couple events. He's a pretty straight shooter, which is always a good thing when you're in the Army. And so we really appreciate you being here, Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor John Walsh.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, fellow veterans, it truly is an honor for me to be here, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and spend some time to honor Montana's heroes. So thank you very much. On behalf of the thousands of Montana men and women who are currently serving in our armed forces, it's truly a privilege for me to be here with you today to honor Montana's and America's true heroes. I can think of no place that I, as your Lieutenant Governor and a fellow veteran, would rather be than at a ceremony to honor Montana's veterans and heroes. Through untold courage and sacrifice, America's veterans have secured the liberty whenever and wherever our nation has asked them to do so. In times of darkness and in times of danger, as well as in times of peace and prosperity, Americans veterans have been there. The first Veterans Day was declared a National Day of Remembrance by President Woodrow Wilson 94 years ago in 1919. In the years since President Wilson made the 11th of November a National Day of Remembrance, the scope of our observance has changed. From a day set aside to remember the dead from one war to a day in which American veterans from all wars, as well as those who are serving in peace, could be honored. Today we come together to honor and celebrate both those veterans whose service is recorded in history and to recognize our current warriors who are serving around the world today. Men and women stationed around the world standing in harm's way to protect us at this very moment. Millions of America's men and women have served us in the past 200 years. As I have seen in my own military career, the men and women in our military put service above self. They answered the call to duty with courage, and they served with unshakable duty to state and nation. These citizen soldiers don't seek personal gain or even fame. Their country called, and they answered. Theirs was simply a patriotic response. Our men and women are part of the best trained, most disciplined, and technologically advanced military in the world today. And they have another great advantage. They have the example of American veterans who came before them. And I can tell you from my personal experience, especially the veterans from the Vietnam veterans, I want to thank you so much, because it was because of you who said, never again will our nation have to endure what we had to endure. So the men and women who are coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan today, they come home to parades, they come home to open arms. And it's because of the service members of the Vietnam War that we are able to do that. So thank you so much for what you've done for our country. From the day George Washington took command, the uniform of the United States has stood for courage and decency and shining hope in a world of darkness. And all who have worn that uniform have won the thanks of the American people. Veterans Day is set aside to remember every man, woman who has taken up arms for this country. We honor every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman who has given up some of the best years of their lives to the service of the United States, and who stood ready to give their life if need be. Today, 25 million military veterans live amongst us. And on this day, our nation salutes each and every one of them. I'd like to ask that all the veterans in our audience today, please raise your hand and let us recognize you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice to our state and to our nation. You know, another group that we sometimes forget to recognize, and that's the family members of our veterans. The husbands, the wives, the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, the brothers. If it wasn't for your sacrifice and support, we would not be the greatest nation or greatest military in the world today. And we wouldn't be able to accomplish the missions that we are able to accomplish today. So thank you to all the family members for what you do. President John F. Kennedy once said that a nation reveals itself not only by the people that it produces, but also by the people it honors, the people it remembers. Ladies and gentlemen, you are, simply put, all ordinary people who accomplished extraordinary things, and you have the external gratitude of a very grateful nation. May God bless each and every one of you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Okay, every year we sort of conclude this ceremony with a wreath laying, and Evan Brown, who is a World War II veteran, who's from Charlotte, from Florence now, I guess, actually. And Evan, if you want to go back to the back of the where the trucks are now, and Brenda Desmond, who is a Veterans Court judge, is going to be another one of the people who bring the wreaths up. I mean, as far as closing remarks, I just want to remind people that there are a couple of things that are happening today still. One of them that there's a movie, I believe it's called Ground Operations, from Battlefield to Farm Fields. It'll be shown, Transition Missoula, it will be shown tonight, I believe at the University Theater. And if it was in the paper yesterday, so that's something that you might want to attend. Tonight at, I guess it is, I'm not sure. Go at 6, and then if it's 7, you'll just be early, okay? Also, Montana Legal Services, Boone Carlberg, are offering free estate planning for veterans on November 20th from 5 to 7. Chance for veterans to go have their will put together and get some information about estate planning. So that's free to all veterans, and that'll be happening on the 20th of November. Anyway, the other thing that's happening that happens every year is that after this ceremony, the Old Post Pub, which is Post 101's business, will be providing free free SOS to everyone in attendance, all veterans, everybody who's here wants some SOS. SOS, as you know, is chipped beef on toast, which doesn't sound like that's what SOS stands for. What SOS stands for, I'm going to say it, but SOS stands for something on a shingle. That's what it stands for. Okay? So that will be right after this over at the Old Post Pub. But, you know, now in remembrance of our those who died, before we retire the colors, and when we retire the colors after the wreath laying and taps, Susanna and LeGrand and the others are going to be singing a song about the eagle cried. But now we're going to have these wreaths brought forward and put in place on the stands in front of the podium. So we can have the color guard sort of move forward.
You folks even knew his name, but a hero, yes, was he. Left boy, came back a man. Still many just don't understand about the reasons we are free. I can't forget the look in his eyes, or the tears he cried, as he said these words to me. All gave some gave all.
Let's put them on
Some
here.
stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Some gave all. Game is no longer here, but his words are oh so clear. They echo throughout our land. But all his friends who gave us all, who stood the ground and took the fall to help their fellow man. Love your country and live with pride. And don't forget those who died. America, can't you see? All gave some gave all. And some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Some gave all. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall. Yes, recall. Some gave all. Some gave all.
And as we conclude this, I'd call on Father Noonan to give our closing benediction.
Lord God, you've given us the gift of the story of our lives, ways of understanding who we are, ways of making sense of our world, of finding meaning and knowing how to respond to all that happens in our lives. Please show us where our stories fall short or are too narrow, where they exclude rather than include, where they divide rather than unite. Help us to see a story we live out that may go amiss of what is real, where it allows us to escape becoming whole, where it lets us live comfortably in fear. Fill us with your story, the story of unity and compassion and love. Fill us with images that energize us and give us hope and lead us to the fundamental truth that you've tried to teach us all along, that we are all one. Amen.
Thank you, Father Noonan. We've come to the conclusion of the ceremony, except we're going to now retire the colors. And before we go, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, for staying through this. It got a little disjointed and the clock on the tower didn't work. I'll blame it on the tower clock. So we're going to retire colors. First of all, our soldier detail will walk off, and then our Veteran Warrior Society Honor Guard will walk off, and then the Post 101 color detail. But again, thank you for coming, and now we retire the colors, and as they're being retired, Susanna and LeGrand, Rod, Louis will sing a song that was written by a major in the Army who's today, but it's a song he wrote dedicated to Vietnam veterans, and I want you to listen to the words as we're retiring the colors here, okay? And again, thank you for coming. Go ahead.
2, 3, 4.
12 months roll behind him, and all his hopes ahead. A private deed but his young heart, from all the things he did. As he stepped off the airplane, he stooped and kissed the ground, and he traded warm foreign soil for one in his hometown. There was no love for the soldier, limping back home from the fight. That old flag was stitched with more than blue and white. But we turned our eyes when the eagle cried. A gentle